Just a quick walk around view of my 37 Ford truck. I bought it in 1976 at the age of 14. Spent the next several years restoring it. I believe it was 1982 when I got it running. Well, it was running before then. I drove the bare chassis across town from my dad's garage to my grandpa's farm, where I assembled the body back on the frame. It still has the original 21 stud Flathead V8. I didn't realize until just recently that that's a fairly rare motor. Supposedly they only made that configuration 1 year with the front mount water pumps as opposed to the ones in the heads. And the serial number stamped in the block matches the serial number stamped in the frame. It is the original engine. It's been bored out 1/8 inch, 125,000 oversized. We had to clean up, so we just went to the 100 horse standard, and that gives me another 1/8 inch to go oversize on that if I ever needed to. Right now the battery is out of it. That blew up on me last year. I jump started it with a dead battery. Yeah, I figured a generator will bring a dead battery back to life, so I left it run for a while, but I forgot to loosen the vent caps on it, and it built up pressure and exploded. It blew the top right off, ended up laying on the front of the head, and with all the acid spilling on the engine, it kind of curled up. The engine just has a rattle can and spray paint on it, is why that curled. The body is all done in Imron, close to the original shade of green, other than I added a little metallic to it. The inside of the grill shell, the underside of the fenders, the inside of the cab, bottom of the cab, everything is painted inside and out. It currently has 33,982 miles on it. That is actual miles. It had 30,333 miles on it when I bought it. I believe I am the 5th owner. I know the last 3 owners that had it prior to me. The last 3 owners were all in the Dakota, Illinois area, which is where I grew up, and bought the truck after falling in love with it as a young teenager. Had to have it. All these years later, I still have it, and now it's time to go. It amazes me the quality of the bodywork back in the day. The seam across the back of the cab roof, welded across the inside. The only body filler in either corner of the cab. There's less lead filler than what you would find in a lead pencil. It was just perfectly smooth all the way across. The windshield is supposed to open out, but I had to buy a new frame for it, and it didn't fit quite right. The hinge is bound up. Just didn't want to work properly, so I glued it shut. The passenger door window is kind of stiff going up and down. I had all new windows made, but the bracket at the bottom I got on slightly crooked, and the crank mechanism binds up on it. I just never got around to redoing it. I'm ready to wash it now. The paint is beginning to bubble up with age. It was painted in 1982, so it's held up fairly good over the years, other than it is starting to bubble. Pins and running board ribs I did by hand. Body shop did all the rest with their power tools. I'm cleaning the hood with baking soda because of the battery exploding. I just want to get everything washed up good. It doesn't seem to have hurt the Imron paint any. Unlike the rattle can paint I used on the head, it held up surprisingly well. The acid had sprayed through the louvers, ran down the fender, and puddled up on the running board, and other than a little dirt I need to wash off, it doesn't seem to have affected that at all either. But the paint job held up good. When I restored it, I had to weld a patch panel in the bottom side of the door. I did some of the welding. Well, I welded the floorboard patches in. Had my cousin weld the door patch that I made for it, and he had to have a little more access to the inside, so that got cut open a bit. And I found out he was even worse at welding than I was, even though he had 3 years of body shop class in school. So, glove box door I never had for it. Other than that, transmission tunnel I have the remains of. I never got it patched up and put back in. I kept thinking I should look for one on eBay, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. The feet obviously aren't original. They're out of I believe it's a 79 Pinto wagon. I have the original feet, but it needed to be recovered, and that was something I couldn't do myself at the time anyway. I haven't tried since then, but couldn't afford to have it done. I had the buckets, so I just made a mount for them and put them in, and I've liked them well enough I never bothered to change anything. Couple of wrinkles in the back wall of the cab, body shop. I took it to, didn't know how to work them out. Couple scratches on the back here. I messed up. I had a load of lumber on here, kind of like the couple boards I have under the engine on the back right now. A couple of the boards slid ahead on me and scuffed the back of the cab. That's my ignorance there. It's basically original, other than I chrome plated a few things that never were originally. The light metallic paint, and the engine being bored 1/8 inch oversize. Other than that, mechanically it is original right down to the mechanical brakes, which a lot of people complain about not working. The first 2 years I had this on the road, I was running the regular truck plates on it and had to go through the safety inspection lane with it. And when they tested the brakes, they said that they had never seen brakes check as even as what mine did. So I did a pretty good job on that for being a 14, 15-year-old kid when I did the brake job on it. Safety lane guy said hydraulic brakes don't check anywhere near as even as what I have these set up at. As good as the brakes are, I've never tried to lock them up on blacktop to see if it would slide, but I have occasionally gotten on them enough to slide a little on gravel, which I didn't really plan to, but they all break nice and even. It doesn't pull to one side or the other. Just for being mechanical brakes that so many people complain about, they work amazingly well. Grill teeth I did by hand. Came out fairly straight and smooth. I'm happy with them anyway. The grill trim, I only had one side piece, and the center piece I didn't have the crank hole cover or the other side, so I just put some stick-on fender well trim on it when I restored it. I have since then picked up the other pieces. I just never got around to putting them on. It was probably originally a vacuum operated windshield wiper. It had electric motor in it already when I bought it, and it works. It's a little slow, but it works. It's one side only, which is original. For being 33-year-old paint job on it, it's still holding up fairly good. It's showing its age, but still presentable. When I had the windows made for it, I went with kind of a medium dark tint. From some angles they almost look black, but other angles the light does shine through. The windshield you can only have, I believe, the top 6 inches tinted. But on this, when the windshield is only 15, 16 inches high, that's a third, almost half the windshield tinted. But it doesn't look bad. Front bumper is just painted. It was originally plated. That just another thing I couldn't afford to do when I originally went through it. But to have that redone, it's just 3 bolts and it's off, and send it to the plater if you want to. Not that big of a deal. It's just been a fun old truck. With a 666 rear end gear in it, it runs 4,000 RPM at 60 miles an hour, so it's not a highway vehicle by any means. I have put some highway miles on it, but first 2 years I ran at 60, 65, passing cars. I ended up spinning the bearings out and ruined the crank and 3 rods. Bought another engine just for the crankshaft and the rods that I needed. Got new bearings and I'm good to go again. And at that time I added the oil filter, which it never had originally. I mounted that and used a modern spin-on filter. And with finding out the gear ratio in it, now I drive at 40, 45 miles an hour and under. So like I say, it's not a highway truck by any means. It's not a highway truck by any means with that gear ratio. There's room between the transmission and drive shaft housing. You could fit an overdrive or even a 2-speed overdrive in. I would have liked to have done eventually, but it's just another project I never got around to doing. Also thought about putting a lot taller tire on the back for highway speed, but never did that either. Looking closer after washing, I guess the battery acid did change the color of the paint a little bit where it hit it. It's kind of spotty, but it doesn't seem to have affected it other than the color. I don't know if that would buff out or not. And of course the head was all bubbled up. I washed off and that's got surface rust now. Spray bomb with a paint can is all I did originally. That's all it needs again. So cover the plug wires and spray it and it'll be as good as it was before. What can I say? It's an old truck. Cut open the ignition coil. I have a remote coil mounted over on the fender well. I have a new old stock coil to go with it. I just never put it on.